Welcome back. This will be the last video in the series of videos related to the essay Postmodernism and Performance by Philip Osland. So, moving on to the last part, right before the conclusion, he gives another uh, explanation about postmodernist political theater. So he talked. The previous videos we talk about how representational strategies of radical theater of the 1960s changed the way in which modern theater was perceived. Okay, but there is a familiar problem. Okay, that arises in such a condition is that while their approach to making theater and to the representation were postmodernist in their approach, we have no doubts about that. Their politics and their way of making political art was not. Okay, so even though they were trying to include representation, they were trying to be inclusive and trying to break through from all barriers of theater, their political strategies were not very clear. Okay, so the anti-representational strategies of postmodernist theater and performance art that overtly questioned the truth value of any and all representations could not accommodate the radical theater's desire to represent both the society they sought to change and the utopian community they hoped to bring into being. So while they were, representing and bringing about truth and reality in their works, there was a conflict that they had. They were trying to represent the society as it is. Okay, and in trying to represent the society as it is, they were seeking to change it. They sought to change the society by pointing out its ills and other issues. Okay, at the same time they also were forced with trying to represent the utopian idea of a community that they hoped would soon come into being, right? So they had that kind of a conflict there. And this kind of a conflict that they had set them apart from the dominant culture. They created a counter culture that was different from the dominant culture, but was still a stable cultural practice. It was not breaking the norms. Inasmuch as postmodern world of global communications and capital appears not to have an outside, it seems fruitless for political artists to claim to interrogate postmodern society from such a position. So, if there is no outside, right? If you are trying to uh, showcase when you're producing a play and you're trying to talk about all those who are outside the system and all those who are suffering, but you're doing that from the inside. That is the issue here, right? You are inside that square box and you're talking about all the others who are outside. So how can you have that kind of a position which you yourself have not experienced, and yet how can you say that there is truth value in what you represent? That was the issue here. Okay, that was the political issue of postmodernism. So postmodernist political art in all forms then does not directly deal with topical political issues. Okay, in earlier uh, um, uh, art forms, political issues were dealt with in a very, very direct manner. But here, this is not happening. Rather, the political and social configurations of postmodern culture were interrogated within postmodernist performance. And, that leaves the stage open to representation, open to, deliberations. Without taking a position, you can't really stand and say that no, this is wrong, that is wrong. But when you are saying that this and that is wrong, you have to believe in one thing which you think must be right. So then that becomes a political issue. Okay. So the Wooster group that we discussed in the earlier portion, okay, they were a New York theater collective and they evolved in the 1980s. Okay, they tried to recreate actual events. They tried to create fictional recreations of actual events. Okay, so what they did is that they presented multiple texts through a variety of performances that ranged from conventional acting of how when you act out something in a normal way, to reading with the text in their hand, as I told you earlier, to recreating their own behavior from videotape. That means they would videotape themselves performing and then they would try to recreate their own behavior rather than the character. Okay, and they also repeated words while listening to them on a sound recording. These were different ways in which they try to bring a postmodernist rush to recreating actual events. However, At times also the performance spoke words associated with fictional characters. So sometimes they would be talking the dialogues that were meant for the fictional characters, while during other times they would be talking as themselves. However, these various representation, imagine you're sitting in an audience and watching all this happening. You must be utterly confused. How do you know when is it the character is speaking and when is it that the person or a performer is speaking? How do you draw the distinction? Even if there is a change in tone or accent or mannerisms, it is still difficult for everyone in the audience to identify that kind of a stylistic strategy happening. Okay, so these performance strategies themselves raised questions about the interplay of presentation and representation that we talked about earlier. Okay, so what is fact and what is fiction became a question. All right, so when you are trying to reflect a postmodern world where the distinctions between what is real and what is real unreal, or what is fact and what is fiction, is not there anymore. There is no as we told you earlier, there's no illusion there anymore of, this is real and this is not. So how do you take up a stand, or how do you, draw a line between what is real and unreal? How do you show that this is the performer, this is the actor, or how do you show that this is a recreation of the text and this is a recreation of me myself? All those became problematic here. Okay, also, the when they were recreating the actual events, what were these actual events, and the understanding of that they had of these actual events, what were they based on? Did they confirm, they take oral testimonies from people who were there during the actual event? But then the question comes, is this kind of an informal interview that you take, is it dependable than the official versions? Official versions, you always know, the public versions that will be available would be, somehow changed to fit the popular narrative. But can you trust the others who are speaking? Can you trust that what they are saying is true, especially when you're putting up on stage to be viewed by so many different people, right? How do you define what is correct, what is true, and what is to be believed, right? Or what is to be depended upon? So these are there meaningful differences between performers reading, acting, or repeating these materials? I told you there were different ways in which they put up these performance. So is there a difference when you read it, when you perform it, when you are listening to it or repeating it from some sound recordings? Okay, what is the difference that is happening there? What the production ultimately demonstrated was the eradication of difference among these types of messages and articulations, and the factual, fictional, literal, metaphoric, everything mixed together, and created a postmodern culture at large. The production made no attempt to assess the truth value of any of the documentation that they were repeating. Okay, and no other mode of presentation. Nothing was, the truth value of none of the things that they were saying was ever analyzed, or um, assessed by them. The Wooster Group thus did not claim to comment upon this phenomena from without, but created an analytical image of an information-glutted postmodern society by positioning itself at the interior. So what they did in this process is that they unknowingly or knowingly place themselves on the inside while talking about the outside. So when they were trying to dismantle the society, the idea of society, the idea of identity, they were themselves building up a society or identity. So they were able to place themselves inside and then talk about everything outside. All right. This meant that the theater can no longer be seen as an occupying a fine arts category. So before, theater had this very elevated status when it came to other art forms. Theater had a very elevated status. It was considered to be fine art, like painting and stuff. But now, how do you define the differentiation between theater and film and arts and mass media? Okay, because now, just like these other art forms, theater also functions as a medium that has to compete for audiences with other media. So they are also trying to, fabricate many things so that people will be interested and come to watch them. So in the elevated status of fine arts that it enjoyed is no longer there anymore, because they have to compete for the audience with other forms of media. One result has been that the theater often does not seek to provide original expression. Rather, it can take inspiration from film, from television, popular music as its material. As we told, as we discussed in the case of Cursed Child, okay, it was a popular franchise that exists, and obviously there was a sure shot of success. That means the audience will be pulled towards watching the performance because there is a huge fan base for the Harry Potter franchise. Okay, so what they were doing was they were drawing from popular culture when they were putting up a play of the Cursed Child, right? Another example is Walt Disney's Beauty and the Beast, which was also, produced in this manner. More recently, stage musicals have also been developed from, other existing popular culture narratives. So these, so these, through these postmodernist political art, by contrast, okay, it should always hold representation with suspicion. Unlike what is happening in theater today, postmodernist political art should look at everything with suspicion. So when the Wooster Group was creating those documentary theaters, they never tried to find the truth value, right? But a true postmodernist political art should always try to find the truth value, should look at everything with suspicion, should look at every documentation that they get with suspicion. Okay, and this suspicion is the actual subject of postmodernist political art, our author says. Okay, this suspicion, this doubt that you have upon everything is what is the postmodernist element within this entire thing. Okay, so without positioning ourselves inside or outside, the suspicion can help us to raise questions and find answers for these questions. The Wooster Group, which has been a great influence on many experimental theaters, may be the best example of postmodernist political performance. Even though their performances were not, very much lenient on the truth value, they were confused, they had a lot of conflict, and yet they remain to be one of the best examples of postmodernist political performances. Okay, so there are some examples given of their performances, further examples given, but I'm not discussing them here in this video. Please go and read the text so that it would be easier for you to understand this. Okay, moving on to the conclusion of the essay, the author again, revises some of the points that he has made throughout this essay. He says that although it is possible to present a coherent developmental narrative of postmodern dance, as we told earlier, okay, such a narrative is much more difficult to construct for theater and other forms of aesthetic performances. Nevertheless, he has tried to give us certain pointers which help us identify when this postmodernism as a historical moment and as a stylistic element was introduced into these different categories of performances. Okay, one of the most significant trends is postmodernism, as we discussed earlier, is pluralism and diversity, which meant that the theater is no longer dominated by heterosexual white male playwrights as it once was. Plays by authors today are clearly acknowledged to belong to a range of other identity positions and are now much more visible than they were in the past. Okay, so people belonging to different races, communities, sexual orientations, everything is now much more visible today than it was in the past. Pluralism is also manifest in the still controversial practice of non-traditional casting. It is still controversial, okay, when you do non-traditional casting, but still that is also an evident example of postmodernist element in theater today. Dance too has a form of non-traditional casting because since the 1960s, there are some examples where postmodern dance has employed a range of body types. That means how are they showing this plurality? Not through skin color or anything else, but the different types of bodies are coming, including untrained dancers who have no training are made to be part of performances, dancers with non-athletic bodies. That means they won't be the slim trim people that you usually see. Okay, there will even be some disabled dancers who are coming in. These are all postmodernist trends. Even such popular cultural forms of performance as stand-up comedy reflect the trend towards pluralism, as we discussed earlier. And a range of identity positions are represented on the stand-up stage and in television programs, as well as in films that are derived from stand-ups. Okay. In a different vein, he has also talked about the growing trend in commercial theater towards repurposing existing cultural texts. As I told you, the example of curse style. Okay, existing popular cultural texts are brought in to and made into a performance, and this is a postmodern development. It was not there before. All right. Comparing the features of historically postmodern performance with performance that articulates postmodernism as a new structure of feeling, we run into contradictions. We discussed about how, what is historically postmodern will not be postmodernist. Okay, and some performances that are unquestionably postmodern, such as those of the most performance art monologues that we talked about, okay, still are not postmodernist. Why? Because they have a stable identity. Okay. Then he talked about how postmodernist theater has challenged the assumption by presenting characters whose fragmented identity is constructed from bits of cultural texts. Okay, even in stand-up comedy, this consistent distinctive comic persona is done away with. A similar contradiction appears when we consider the radical theaters of 1960 that we have also discussed at length. Okay, we gave the example of the Wooster Group. These theaters deserve a place in an account of postmodern performance on account of the ways in which they have destabilized, okay, or deconstructed the ideas of traditional theater. Okay, so these are a few points that he discussed in this essay, and he has summed them up in the conclusion part. I hope you enjoyed this essay. If there are any doubts, please make sure that you bring them up. Hopefully not on the day before the exam, but before that you have a few more days of study leave left. So please complete watching this video, and please bring up your doubts as and when they come. Thank you. So, oh, yes, before that, thank you. This was a great semester, and I hope you do well in your life ahead, whatever path that you choose to take up in your life. I hope that you succeed. And remember that it is not what you do, but how you do it that matters. Okay, thank you.